Welcome back, everyone. The skies over to universes tremble as if reality itself is being torn open. A storm unlike anything ever witnessed begins to churn, not of wind or rain, but of pure cosmic wrath. In the heart of that storm stands Thor, gripping Mjolnir as the heavens roar with his fury. And from the breach of a dying world, something impossible emerges. A creature that cannot be reasoned with, cannot be killed, and cannot be stopped. A monster born for one purpose: destruction. As thunder meets apocalypse, the question becomes terrifyingly simple: can even a god survive the thing that once killed Superman? Thor had faced demons, titans, and gods, but he had never faced Doomsday. The first signs of the coming disaster didn't appear in Asgard or Earth, but in deep space, where entire star systems flickered out as if someone were erasing them with deliberate intent. The Bifrost trembled from the shockwaves, and Heimdall, whose sight reached through galaxies, felt something he had never felt before: dread. Thor was the first to answer the summons. He arrived before Heimdall, with the echo of storm still clinging to him, Mjolnir humming at his side. He expected tidings of war, of invasion, perhaps a new threat from the realms beyond. But not this. Heimdall's voice wavered, just slightly, when he spoke. He told Thor that a rupture in reality had opened something like a wound, bleeding out energy that did not belong to their universe. At first, it seemed dormant. Then something came through, something colossal, something violently alive. Thor peered into the projection Heimdall conjured. What he saw was a creature tearing through meteor fields as though they were leaves. Bone spikes, scarred flesh, eyes burning with feral hatred. It moved with purpose toward Earth. Heimdall explained that the monster's arrival had destabilized the very fabric of the cosmos. This thing was not born of natural life. It adapted, evolved, and resurrected itself after every defeat, growing stronger each time. Thor asked the obvious question: could it be killed? Heimdall whispered the only answer he could give: no. But Thor was not one to accept impossibility. Even when impossibility roared in his face, with a firm grip on Mjolnir and a surge of thunder that cracked the golden bridge beneath his feet, he launched himself into the cosmos. He would intercept this monster before it reached Earth, before it could touch the people he had sworn to protect. As Thor flew through the void, the air around him shimmered with lightning. Stars streaked past as he followed the trail of destruction. Entire chunks of asteroid belts had been pulverized, chunks of rock drifting like dust. Energy signatures burned in the emptiness, each more violent than the last. He spotted it near a collapsing dwarf moon. The creature stood atop its fragmenting surface, bellowing into space as if challenging anything that dared come near. Thor hovered, feeling a sensation he rarely felt: the weight of a storm gathering not in the skies, but in his chest. He descended slowly, letting the crackle of thunder announce him. Lightning coiled around his arms. Mjolnir glowed like a miniature star. Doomsday turned, its eyes empty of reason but full of hunger. It didn't recognize Thor as a god, a warrior, or even a threat. It recognized only one thing: something to kill. Thor didn't wait for it to charge. With a roar that echoed through the vacuum, he hurled Mjolnir forward. The hammer spun like a storm-bound comet, striking Doomsday square in the chest and sending the monster skidding across the moon's breaking surface. But Doomsday rose instantly, unfazed, its bone plates shifting as if adapting. Thor realized then that this was not a creature that needed to learn. It simply evolved. Then it came for him. Doomsday leapt with such force that the moon shattered beneath its feet. Thor caught the charge with both hands, lightning exploding from his palms. The collision sent shockwaves through the stars, the dwarf moon crumbling into dust. Thor felt the creature's strength roar, unrelenting, terrifying in its ferocity. Doomsday grabbed Thor and hurled him through what remained of the moon's crust, slamming him into open space. Thor caught himself, spinning, summoning his storm. He cracked the heavens with lightning, calling down bolts that struck Doomsday over and over. But the creature only grew louder, stronger, angrier. The battle had barely begun, and already Thor understood. This was unlike any enemy he had faced. There was no fear in its eyes, no thought, only an instinct to annihilate anything in its path. But Thor had faced the end of the cosmos before. He steadied himself, tightening his grip on Mjolnir, summoning every ounce of godly power he possessed. This would not be a battle of might alone. It would be a battle of endurance, of will, of survival itself. and in the silence of space, as the two forces hurled themselves toward each other again, Thor whispered a single vow no mortal would ever hear: "Earth will not fall today." Thor surged forward with renewed fury. The storm around him expanded into a swirling vortex of cosmic lightning, illuminating Doomsday's jagged silhouette as the monster bounded through space. Their second collision was even more violent than the first. Thor's lightning clashed with bone and unbreakable muscle, exploding in a burst of blinding radiance that rippled through the void. Thor swung Mjolnir in a wide arc, landing a devastating blow to Doomsday's side. The monster stumbled, but only for a heartbeat. Thor pressed the advantage, unleashing a barrage of strikes so fast they left streaks of light across the shattered remnants of the moon. Each hit thundered like the rage of creation itself. But Doomsday adapted. The monster's bone armor thickened, shifting and sharpening. Its body reshaped itself mid-battle, reacting to the very force Thor used against it. With a guttural roar, Doomsday caught Mjolnir mid-swing. The impact sent a quake through Thor's arm, nearly dislocating it. Doomsday slammed Thor into a floating slab of fractured rock, with such force the stone atomized around them. Thor grit his teeth as pain pulsed through him. But pain was a companion he had long since learned to ignore. He summoned lightning through his body, shocking Doomsday until the beast released him. With a swift motion, Thor reclaimed Mjolnir and hurled himself back into combat. But the storm god was starting to understand the truth. This creature was learning him. Each tactic he used became less effective. Doomsday moved faster now, anticipating his swings. It absorbed more lightning with every blast. It was evolving with terrifying speed. Thor needed to change strategy. He propelled himself backward, putting distance between them. Then, he lifted Mjolnir high above his head. The cosmos darkened. Every spark of energy in the vicinity bent toward him as he prepared to unleash the God Blast, one of his rarest, most devastating powers. The air crackled, the stars dimmed. Doomsday charged. Thor released the blast. A column of pure divine fury erupted, engulfing Doomsday in a beam so intense it tore through the debris field, vaporizing entire mountains of floating stone. The shockwave traveled for hundreds of thousands of miles, scattering dust and meteoroids like ashes in a hurricane. Thor hovered, chest heaving, his arm trembling from the power he had unleashed. No creature had ever survived the God Blast unscathed. Not even Galactus had emerged unmarked. But as the glowing dust settled, Thor's heart sank. Doomsday was still there, charred, smoking, but standing. Then, it roared a sound that shook the void and sent tremors through Thor's soul. Bone plates began knitting themselves back together. New spikes formed. Its muscles bulged, strengthened by surviving the divine force. And then, impossibly, its eyes began to change. The creature had learned to endure a god's power. It had evolved past the pain. Thor braced himself as Doomsday launched forward with blinding speed. The monster's fists collided with Thor's chest, sending him careening into the remains of a broken planet nearby. Thor crashed into the crust, burrowing deep through stone and metal until he hit the molten core. Lava surged around him as he attempted to rise. But Doomsday was already there. It ripped through the surface, diving after him. A clawed hand seized Thor by the throat, lifting him through the boiling magma as if pulling him from water. Thor struggled, his muscles straining as Doomsday hurled him up through the planet and out into space once more. Thor drifted, stunned, surrounded by floating shards of planet. He had not been tossed around like this in centuries, not since his encounter with the World Serpent. Doomsday didn't relent. It leaped after Thor, its speed almost matching his own lightning-born movement. It grabbed Thor's arm and twisted, snapping the bone with a sickening crack. Thor roared in agony. But agony was fuel. With his good arm, Thor summoned the storm with everything he had. Clouds formed where clouds should not exist. Lightning spread across the vacuum like living rivers. As Doomsday lunged, Thor called down a bolt the size of a mountain, slamming it into both himself and the beast. The explosion ruptured space itself, sending both warriors tumbling apart. Thor drifted, clutching his broken arm, Mjolnir calling back to him like a whisper through the void. He reached out and caught it, feeling restored strength flow through his body. Bones mended, muscles tightened. His eyes glowed with renewed fury. He knew this fight could not drag on. Every second brought Doomsday closer to Earth, and if it reached the planet, no army could stop it. No hero could contain it, not even Thor himself. The god of thunder drew a deep breath, the weight of the cosmos pressing on his chest. He steadied himself, preparing to unleash a plan forged in desperation. He would not simply defeat Doomsday, he would contain it. He turned toward the distant blue glow of Earth, then back toward the monster now rising from the cosmic debris. He whispered into the void, "This ends now." Thor steadied himself as Doomsday rose from the dust of shattered worlds. The creature's silhouette pulsed with violent strength, larger now, its bones jagged like the edges of broken spears. Every second it lived, it grew harder to kill, harder to stop, harder to even slow down. Thor clenched Mjolnir, the hammer thrumming with the tension of a storm begging to be unleashed. But raw power would no longer be enough. He needed strategizing beyond brute force, something desperate. He soared backward, using the pull of distant gravity wells to reposition himself. As he flew, his mind raced. There was one place where this monster could be sealed away, even if only temporarily. A place where even a resurrecting behemoth like Doomsday might be contained. The heart of a dying star. Thor shifted course. Doomsday roared when it saw him turn away. It charged with terrifying speed, ripping through asteroids and fragments of dead planets like paper. Thor could feel the air of its hateful pursuit, but he pushed forward faster, summoning the winds of 1,000 storms to accelerate him through the void. A massive red supergiant lay ahead, pulsating like a cosmic drum. Its core was unstable, close to collapse. To any other being, it was a death sentence. To Thor, it was a weapon. He dove toward the star, letting its gravity pull him in. The temperature rose instantly, waves of light burning across his armor. His cape ignited, evaporating into sparks. Yet Thor did not slow. Behind him, Doomsday followed, uncaring of the impossible heat. Its flesh charred, melted, and reformed all at once. The creature tore through solar flames with the same rage it used for stone and steel. Thor plunged deeper. As the star's outer layer swallowed them both, the world became fire. Flames, billions of degrees hot, wrapped around his body. He could feel the storm inside him fighting to break free, clashing with the inferno outside. Doomsday thrashed through the furnace, its bellow echoing through plasma storms. Thor used the burning pressure as leverage, slamming Mjolnir into the creature's chest. The blow created a shockwave inside the star, sending ripples through the solar sea. Doomsday staggered. Thor struck again, and again. Each hit shook the star's equilibrium, causing eruptions of fire that engulfed them both. Thor fought through the blinding heat, but he could feel himself weakening. Even a god had limits. Even a god could burn. He pushed deeper still toward the core. The light became unbearable. The star's heart loomed before them, glowing with lethal brilliance, a sphere of raw nuclear fury. Thor could barely withstand it. His skin burned, muscles screaming in protest. But Doomsday kept coming. That was the danger. That was the horror. This creature did not understand pain. Thor roared and hurled Mjolnir with every remaining ounce of strength he possessed. The hammer streaked through the inferno like a star of its own, slamming into Doomsday and driving the monster into the very center of the stellar core. The reaction was immediate. The star destabilized. A low rumble shook the universe. Thor called Mjolnir back, and as the hammer tore through the layers of the star to return to his hand, Thor used that momentum to propel himself upward. He flew with all his might, fire searing at his heels. If he stayed a moment longer, the collapse would consume him. Doomsday, struggling to rise from the crushing density of the core, roared in fury, but too late. The supergiant imploded. Light swallowed everything. A shockwave exploded outward as the star collapsed into a brilliant supernova. Time seemed to slow as fire and radiation tore through space, devouring the monster at the center. Thor burst from the solar surface just before the explosion engulfed it. The force hit him like 1,000 hammers. He was thrown across space, tumbling through the void until he regained control. His armor was nearly melted away. His hair burned at the ends. His skin blistered, though already healing. He watched the expanding ring of the supernova, its core collapsing into a neutron star. For the first time since the battle began, Thor allowed himself a breath. Maybe it was enough. But then the dust shifted. Something moved. A silhouette emerged at the heart of the explosion. Doomsday, alive, burned beyond recognition, bleeding molten bone, but alive, and worse evolved again. Doomsday looked at the supernova around it, then at Thor, and its eyes burned with something new, understanding. It had learned from the star. It had survived the unthinkable. Thor felt a chill ripple through him. This thing was now more dangerous than ever. He readied himself, knowing there was no turning back now. The battle that followed would decide far more than victory or defeat. It would decide whether any universe could survive this creature. And Doomsday, newly reborn in stellar fire, rushed toward him with apocalyptic rage. Doomsday erupted from the fading glow of the supernova like a demon forged in cosmic fire. Its body had transformed denser, heavier, jagged with molten bone. Every plate along its arms and back glowed faintly like cooling metal. The heat of the collapsed star clung to it like armor. Thor stared in horror. The creature had not only survived, had adapted to the heart of a dying sun. It was no longer just a monster. It was a cosmic extinction event wearing the shape of rage. Doomsday came fast, faster than anything Thor had ever seen. It folded space around itself with every movement, its strength amplified by the nuclear core it had endured. Thor tightened his grip on Mjolnir and summoned every shred of storm remaining in his veins. Their collision ruptured space, not metaphorically, literally. A crack tore across the fabric of the void, spreading like a scar. Energy spilled outward, distorting gravity, bending starlight. Thor tumbled back, lightning slicing across his skin. Doomsday didn't even flinch. It reached for Thor, but the thunder god spun away, weaving between floating shards of star matter. He couldn't overpower it like this. He needed one final gambit. Thor soared upward, drawing Doomsday with him. He let himself drift toward the edges of a nearby wormhole, a cosmic anomaly formed from the shockwaves of the supernova. Its pull was chaotic, unstable, dangerous even for a god. But for Doomsday, it could be the only prison strong enough to bind something that could not be killed. Thor turned back to face the creature. His chest burned, his breath ragged. He had never felt exhaustion like this, not during Ragnarok, not in the wars of Jotunheim, not even in the darkest battles against Thanos. Doomsday lunged. Thor reacted without hesitation. He hurled Mjolnir with such force that the hammer cracked the creature's jaw, snapping bone and sending fire spraying from the wound. The impact stunned Doomsday long enough for Thor to close the distance. He wrapped his arms around the monster, lightning burning through his body, crackling across Doomsday's molten skin. The beast thrashed violently, bones cutting into Thor's flesh. But Thor held on with the grip of a god who knew there was no other path. He pulled them both toward the wormhole. The gravitational tide took hold immediately, dragging them closer. Doomsday struggled, its claws rattling like blades against Thor's armor. Each strike was like a meteor impact. Thor coughed blood, but his arms did not release. He screamed, summoning every storm that had ever answered his call. Lightning burst from him in a sphere of white-blue fury. Thunder roared where no sound should exist. Doomsday howled, tearing at Thor's chest, ripping into his side. Thor felt ribs break, muscles tear. His vision blurred. Darkness crept at the edges of his sight, but he refused to falter. Not now. Not while Earth still existed behind him. The wormhole's pull intensified, bending their bodies, pulling them across dimensions. Chaos swirled as the anomaly expanded, fueled by their clath. Thor felt reality twist around him, the universe warping as they crossed the threshold. Then he realized something terrible. Doomsday was adapting again. The creature's body was shifting, bone plates forming in patterns shaped by the warping dimension. It was learning to survive the wormhole. If it adapted fully, it would emerge elsewhere, stronger, angrier, unstoppable. Thor had seconds. He reached for Mjolnir with his mind calling, not to the hammer, but to the storm inside him. The storm that had existed long before the weapon. The storm that was Thor. Mjolnir tore, free from the void behind them, and streaked through space, the hammer glowing with godly fury. It slammed into Thor's outstretched hand, and for a moment, Thor felt clarity. He pressed Mjolnir against Doomsday's chest, driving the hammer into the creature's flesh as hard as he could. Lightning surged, fire erupted, and the wormhole vibrated as if screaming. Thor whispered the ancient words of the Odinforce, the command of the storm, the sacrifice of a king. Light erupted around them, a white, pure, final light. The wormhole imploded. Everything went silent. When the universe settled, the stars returned. The void calmed, and a single figure drifted through the darkness. Thor, barely conscious, barely breathing, his armor destroyed, his body torn. Mjolnir floated beside him, dim and cracked. He was alone. Doomsday was gone. Not destroyed, nothing could destroy Doomsday, but sealed somewhere beyond the reach of universes. Trapped in the collapsing remains of what had once been a wormhole, a prison not meant to kill, but to contain. Thor's eyes fluttered open, pain etched into his every movement. He managed to whisper a single thought, a single relief, as he looked toward the distant glimmer of Earth. Save he drifted toward the Bifrost's distant shimmer, waiting for Heimdall to find him. And as he floated, he wondered not with fear, but with solemn truth, whether Doomsday would ever escape that impossible prison. And if it did, would any universe be ready? The universe around him responded with silence. But Thor, god of thunder, breathed weakly, painfully, triumphantly. For now, the storm had prevailed. For now, the monster slept. And for now, the worlds lived on. Even in a universe filled with gods, monsters, and forces beyond imagination, some battles are not fought for victory, but for survival. Thor's clash with Doomsday was never about triumph, glory, or proving the strength of a god. It was about standing between the innocent and the impossible. It was about choosing sacrifice when every other path had already crumbled. Doomsday could not be killed. It could not be reasoned with. It could only be delayed. Yet Thor's courage created one undeniable truth. Sometimes a single warrior's resolve can shift the fate of countless worlds. His body broke, his strength failed, but his spirit endured long enough to cast a monster outside reality itself. And that is the heart of this tale. A god is not defined by the storms he commands. He is defined by the storms he endures. Somewhere beyond the edges of existence, Doomsday still waits, evolving in silence. But somewhere closer across the stars, across the realms, Thor still rises, healing, watching, preparing, because he knows battles like these are never truly over. But as long as there are those strong enough to stand, there will always be hope strong enough to survive. And that is the legacy of gods and monsters.